Hi friends, today I'm painting these little crocuses, and I thought they were so pretty, and they kind of fascinate me how they grow up out of the snow. Pretty amazing. They look like such delicate little flowers. This is one I did the other day, and now we're going to do it again. And I'm going to show you the brush strokes I'm using and my color palette. By the way, I'm using my 8 round, which is very much designed similarly to my favorite brush, the 8 Velvet Touch. So you can't get my brushes anymore, but you can get these Princeton Velvet Touch brushes. So if you have one or the other, that's perfectly fine. The other thing is I have shared these a lot in the past. These are the set of 10 student brushes, Degatos. They're like $15 or something. They're really inexpensive. I've been playing with these for a year and they're still working well, and you get 10 of them. They're all round, so I will link that below for you. And then the paints I'll be using will be my Lang, Paul Rubens Lang. This is the student grade. I've already kind of spritzed them just a little bit to dampen them. Now I want to show you the color palette I want to use. I have not had these flowers, but I've seen lots of pictures of them because I think they're so beautiful. So I'm just going to show you the colors I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using just purple, purple, a little bit of blue, green, of course, and yellow for the inside. So let's go ahead and stamp our little swatch. I'm so glad you guys are having fun with these, by the way. I'm trying to work with this sun that I have coming in. This is kind of sunset hour, and a light comes through my studio here, which I think is really cool to paint with. So these are just a little rubber stamp. I've put them on this acrylic, and then I'm using a Ranger ink stamp pad, and it just helps me get an idea of the colors I want to use. Sometimes I might pick out some colors and it turns out I really don't like them together, or I wanted something different, so it's quite handy. I'm going to use, I believe this is the violet in the My Lang palette, so pretty true purple. There we go. So that's the violet. I'll be using that. And then let's see here. I think I'll use this blue here. This is and I'll list all my colors below. So I love those two colors together. I think they're really, really pretty. And then my go-to greens always tend to be sap green, tree green. So I'm just gonna put those, maybe a little bit of olive, just for some darker areas. So there we go. And let's see, what other color might I use? Oh, we need the cad yellow for just the middle there of the flowers. Look what a beautiful little palette that is. So I think that's what I'm pretty happy with. The other thing is I've got my Mead water wells. Make sure you have 2 containers of water just so that you can wash your brush really good and then rinse it really good. Really important in watercolors. The brush strokes I'm going to be using for this are a thin and then thick brush stroke. So we're kind of going from like a point push type of feeling, if you want to say that in your mind. So let me just show you what I mean here. I'm going to grab some purple. By the way, I've got my little Daisy Mead palette. I like this one, especially when I'm filming because it's smaller and I can hold it in my hand. I just like it. I actually travel with it too, even though it's ceramic. So the little flowers here, what I'm going to use, the front petals I'm using, just resting my side of my hand on my desk here, and I'm going to very lightly. Now, anytime you want a small brush stroke, typically I would tell you to hold your brush straight up and down. I'm holding mine to the side a bit just because I don't want to block my view. So the brush stroke I'm going to use for that petal that's in front is going to be point, And then I start pushing and opening up my brush like that, and then up again to the point. Now, I always talk about when I paint, I try to find just something recognizable about these flowers. And what that was for me is they come down and they're kind of long and go into a narrow spot here. So that's how I typically will paint a flower, because I just want it to be identifiable. Now here's a side point, press. I'm pressing down into the brush, seeing my brush open up. So we've got this real blossoming out like a V, and that's what I wanted. Let me grab a little bit more paint here. And let's do another one here. So this one, I'm going to start a little bit with the side of my brush, because the side of my brush, I'll get a wider stroke because I'm using more of the barrel of the brush. So if I'm just using the tip of my brush, that's a very thin little line there. But if I use the side of my brush, I can get a really quite wide brush stroke. Now the trick here is to go from the side and then lift your brush, come up to that point like that. And that's the brush stroke we're going to use for these. So let's go ahead and get started here. I will be working wet on dry and a little wet on wet. I've also got my green here that I'll use for the stem. Now for those long, beautiful leaves, it's that same type of stroke. So point, light, light, light pressure. And as I keep moving, I'm applying pressure, opening up that brush, and then picking it back up again. So I've got more pressure in the middle to create that width, and then up on the tip, very light pressure. All right, so maybe practice those. And then for that wet on wet, what I'll do is add in some of that blue to this just to give it a little bit of interest. Point, side of my brush, just like that. So those are the basic brush strokes we're going to use. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to put just a little bit more paint. This is that Velvet Touch. I'm going to move that to the side in my little brush holder. And let's pick up some of that violet, which is quite strong. So water it down with maybe 50-50, because we can always go darker. So I'm putting that paint in there. Now I can see that's a really dark value. You can play with your values. I've do this a lot. So with that purple, here is our dark value, which we want for those petals that are in front, so they really pop out. Now for the middle petals, we want something lighter. That's a little too light, and that's why it's good to practice this, so you can kind of see the different values. So that's a little bit lighter. Now for the back petals, I might even use lighter. So this is probably 80% pigment, 20% water. This is 50-50, and this is 80% water, 20% pigment. And I want to make sure I use all of these. The darkest will be the petals in front. The mid values will be kind of the middle flowers or petals, and then the lightest will be the ones more in the back. All right, let's get started. I'm going to make a little puddle of this, maybe right in the middle, so it's a little bit lighter. Like I said, I want to start lighter, and we can always go darker. And I'm going to create this same type of pattern. Now you can kind of draw these in. I will do a tutorial kit for this with the drawing, the swatch sheet, the brush strokes, so that'll help you. And I'm working, by the way, this is Meeden, their block paper. It's 140-pound cold press. That's my favorite. And I'm going to start resting my hand here, point, and then pressing and opening up my brush and come back around, just like that. So starting very lightly, notice I left a little bit of white space in there. And then I'll go ahead and the side, put a petal on the side, point, press, like that. Let's pick up some more paint. This one I'll start at the tip. So press, and then lift up on the point. And I can use the tip of my brush to kind of fill in a little bit there. Now these petals in the back are going to be the lightest ones, so I might even want to add a little bit more water. And tap it off, tap, 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 get rid of that excess paint and water. You'll see when you tap it how much comes off. We don't want any puddles here. Point, press. There we go. Another one here. Flattening my brush out, applying pressure, and then I come up on the point to make that tip of the brush, tip of the petal. Now before this dries, I want to go in and just add in a little wet on wet. I might have even let this dry too much. So I can go in with a damp, clean brush and go right up next to it like that. Damp brush, tap it off. And I'm going to add a little bit more here. Point, press. And going in with a little bit darker at the base of those. Now here's where I might want to go in as well with some of that blue. So I'll pick up some of my blue here. About 50-50, tap, tap, tap. And let's just tap that in. Look at that, isn't that beautiful? So you don't want to wait too long, because if you go into your flower petals or anywhere with a lot wetter consistency than what's there, you're going to get blooms. Now you can wait till it completely dries, that's okay. So right there I got a hard line because that was completely dried. So there we go. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go into a flower right here on the side. And the first petal, so same as I did here, point, start applying more pressure, even putting my brush a little on its side. And now when I want a little bit more detail, I lift my brush up. Can tap in there. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that fun? And then let's do these brushes, these petals here. So I'm not going to bring it all the way down to this petal because I don't want it all to just blend in. I like that white space. So pressure, pressure, using a little bit of the side of my brush. And when I want to get a smaller, little more detailed line, I just lift up on my brush and tip it onto the tip. So these are the petals in the back. I want to make them a little lighter. So I'll add a little bit more water, but then tap, tap, tap. Apply pressure, get that broad brush stroke, tap, tap, tap. And I am leaving white lines in between all these. Now I can go in with that blue. Look at that. And start just adding in here and there. I'm not doing too much towards the back, mostly the front petals. Let's go ahead and move to our third one. Same thing, point, open my brush, and up on the tip of my brush. So lighter, lighter pressure. And you can practice those brush strokes. Tap, tap, tap. Here's one here. Open my brush, and if I keep it to the side, I really get that nice thick brush stroke. This one here, tip of my brush, point. There we go. Again, we'll just keep going. Point, press. And I'm leaving that space in between. So just really playing with that pressure with your brush. I lift up my brush every time I want a tinier line. Let's just go into here. Ooh, again, look at that blue. So, so pretty. There we go. Maybe a little there. Just touching in, and oh, look at that beautiful blend. Maybe a little in the back. Oh, so, so pretty. Let's go ahead and go into our green now. So I have some of my sap green here. We're going to do, again, we start with about 50 water, 50 paint, because you can always go darker. And let's go in and create some of these stems here. So we'll take this one. There we go. Now I'm using that same theory where I've got point, press, and open up my brush. I don't need quite as wide here, so I kept my brush this way. Point, press. There we go. Do it again. Point, press. Got another little brush stroke or leaf there. 50. Tap, tap, tap. Point, press, open up my brush. Lift up. Again. Here's one here. Point, press a little. Point, press. The harder you press, the more that brush is going to open up. Point, press. Let's see here. I sure would like to see these. They look so cute. And there we go. Now I think I'm going to add a little olive green, and I didn't put it on my swatch here, but I think I'm going to add just a tiny bit of brown. I love mixing a really grounding, earthy color to my flowers. Look at that. See how much that added? And this is wet and wet. I think that's just beautiful. Really just, I think, brings it all together. I love adding neutrals. Now, since this is pretty dry, I'm going to go in with our cad yellow. So let's just get a little bit of that in our palette. Be careful. Cad yellow's really, really concentrated. So I want to do 50, maybe even lighter. Tap, tap, tap. And let's go in and add these little stamens here. There we go. Look how pretty. So keeping in mind, you know, purple and yellow, they're complementary colors. They're opposite on the color wheel here. So they're just so beautiful together, and they add some pop here as well, purple and green. So I really love this complementary color palette. I think it's gorgeous. What I'll do now is, just to finish this off, is I'm going to go in and just add a couple. I want the leaf in the petal in front to be the darkest, because whatever's darkest is going to pop out. And right now, these are all kind of the same value. Remember, going back to our values. So I always check my paintings to make sure I have all three values in them, and that the leaves in front are the darkest. So point, press, go down. So see how that popped right out? Tap, tap, tap. So I'm just adding another glaze here. Just darkening that up. I might even add some of that blue. I really want these to look like they're in front. Let's do this one here. grab that purple, just checking, and you can always swatch it to see where you're at. So I'm in that dark value. And let's just go in here, side of my brush, pressure, right here, and just pulling out some of these petals. I think what I'll do is on this petal, I just washed my brush, tapped it off, so it's damp. It's a thirsty brush. And what I'm gonna do is just pull out some lift. I'm going to lift some of that paint just to show maybe the front of the flower is a little folded over like that. So again, I'll just lift some of that out. See how that lighter color went behind the darker part? And then we want to pull this one out too. So a little bit more paint, 50-50. Tap, tap, tap. And let's go here. Point, side of my brush. There we go. And again, look how pretty. Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna soften that line right there. So I have that damp brush again. I've washed it, I've tapped it off, and now let's just soften that line. Now every time I pick up a little paint, I have to then rinse my brush off, or I'm just going to lay that paint I just picked up back onto the paper. Now my last piece here is this little leaf. Point, press. There we go. Look at that. See how much depth and dimension that gave it? And I think we're about done. The only thing I might do is put just a few more. Let's mix a little darker olive green and sap green, 50-50 with the water. And then tap, tap, tap. And I'm just going to add some shadows here. So it looks like the top of that leaf is kind of bending over in the light. And then we can do this one as well. Point, press. There we go. So it looks like it's in front, right? Because we added in that dark color, that dark value. So here's one that's kind of in front. Point, press, and just go down. So that pops it out in front. And then let's just do a couple little small ones here. Just like they're sprouting out. Look how fun. And we're about done. Isn't that a beautiful, fun flower? I just love these. I think they're so cute. All right, everybody, I will create a little tutorial kit. They're only $2.50. You download them. I give you a drawing, the swatch, practice brush strokes to warm up. And I hope you'll join me in these. They're really fun. And how lucky are you if you have these growing in your yard and they're popping out of the snow right now? I think that is just so cool. And most of all, have fun. Whatever that looks like for you, have fun, whether it's the colors, the happy accidents, just have fun with your painting. And I appreciate you all being here with me in our new year, 2025. Happy painting.